Good morning, Pederscopers, and welcome. A little bit of a glare coming in here. I don't know where all that light's coming from, but you gotta love it. You gotta love the light. Thank you for joining me this morning on the Pederscope. Let's get started. This is Keys to Being the Difference. And before we get started today, I want to tell you a little story. See, here in Chicago, it is bitterly cold, and if you're familiar with the cold, you know that it just gets worse when the wind kicks up. The wind has kicked up this morning, and it is bitterly cold. Now, normally my wife takes the kids to school and drops the kids off, but she had something to do this morning. So I thought, you know what, I want to be a good father and drop my kids off at school. I don't want them walking around in this bitter cold. So I thought I'm gonna drop them off at school, and I'm gonna get them as close to the door as possible. I don't want my little girls walking out in this freezing bitter cold. I don't want their cute little faces freezing off. So I drove them to school, and I thought, well, I'm gonna get there early, so I avoid all of the congestion. Well, I got there, and I was greeted by none other than the school principal. She was actually not very happy that I parked where I parked. She gave me one of these, "What are you doing? What are you, nuts? What are you, crazy?" I was like, what? What's going on? What did I do? I'm just dropping my kids off. I'm being a good father, for crying out loud. Yes. Well, she asked me not to drop the kids off on the corner. I'm thinking to myself, where am I supposed to drop them off? In the middle of the street? Well, I drove off and spoke to my wife about it, and she said, "Oh yeah, you obviously didn't get the email. You're not supposed to drop the kids off on the corner." All right, I get it. Lesson learned. Now, the interesting thing about this is today's topic is tell your story. And I thought it would be appropriate for me to start out by telling a story. It was my story. It wasn't my life's story, but maybe you found something in it that you can relate to and laugh at. I hope so. I thought it was funny. I was dealing with a lot of emotions. A lot of emotions came up. Now, the very, very funny and interesting thing was I knew that my topic for this morning was tell your story. And I wanted to have a story to tell. And I was going through my mind like, okay, what's a story I could tell? And I thought of a couple, and I was like, that's not very compelling. That's not very interesting, blah, blah, blah. And so here I am. I'm driving my kids to school. I'm thinking, okay, I've got a couple of minutes now. I need to think up a story to tell. And but I was thinking, but I hope nothing crazy happens to me on the way, that's my story. And it's just kind of funny because that's what happened. Something crazy happened. And fortunately, it wasn't anything dramatic like a car accident or anything like that. Tell your story. No matter what kind of job or position or age you are, when you tell your story, it really draws people in. People love a good story, and it makes you relatable. It sort of brings you down. Not brings you down, but brings you to a level that people can connect with. It's something that I want to be careful with these Pederscopes, because I know that I'm sharing a lot of tips and keys, but I don't want to come across as this high and mighty guru who has it all together and has all the answers, but is not real and is not relatable. I want to be relatable not only on the Pederscopes, but in everything that I do. And I know telling a story, telling about your life, is really what draws people in and makes them connect. And I think the great thing is that you're never too old to tell your story. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. I think the older you get, the more stories that you have to tell. So you can never say, well, I'm too old to make a difference. You're never too old to make a difference. You're never too young to make a difference. No matter what age you're at, you have a story to tell. You have at least one interesting thing that you can share. So that's my encouragement, excuse me, for you today, is to think about your story. Think about a story that you can tell. And, I think what's so interesting about this topic is just within the last 24 hours, I've seen it come up everywhere. One of the podcasts that I listened to, the guy was saying, you know what? My wife told me I need to tell the story behind these events that I'm doing. So here's the story. And I have a mastermind group that I'm a part of. And the last couple of times that we've been meeting, we've just been telling our story, because we know that from our story, we're going to get material that we can talk about and share with other people. You are interesting. You have an interesting life. You might think, oh, nothing interesting ever happens to me. No, there is something in your life that people can relate to, that will be drawn in. I think especially if you're in any kind of a position of authority, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a boss or a preacher or a politician, those positions in particular, I think, are very important, or there's a great opportunity there for you to tell your story. Because anybody who's in a position of authority, people always kind of have this sense of like, well, I won't go too deep into it, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like, people want to know that you're real. So tell your story today. Let people know that you're real. And thank you for taking time to listen to my story about the principal getting on my case about parking on the corner. This has been the Pederscope. This is Keys to Being the Difference. Today's key: tell your story. For these and other fascinating stories, come to my website, stevepederson.com. You know, the big one. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Let's rock out. I'm here every weekday morning at 8:35 a.m. for another Pederscope. And thank you, Stephanie, for your feedback. Thank you for liking my stories, guys. Have a great day telling your stories.